Welcome to the 8 Billion Project, where we're on a mission to make an impact by discovering and sharing the purpose of every person on this planet. I'm your host, Liza, Florida. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 8 Billion Podcast. I am your host, Liza, Florida. And today I've got a very, very special guest, someone that's very near and dear to my heart in just a short amount of time. He has been a taxi driver and a lawyer, a construction laborer, and an internet multimillionaire. But writing and music are by far his preferred occupations. He is privileged as anyone has ever been and believes the greatest benefit of privilege is the capacity to be philanthropic. He thinks that wealth, like freedom, comes with tremendous responsibility. People have a duty to all others less free and are entitled to help from all others more free. We will revive the advance of civilization when we embrace that. Welcome, John Lefebvre, to the 8 Billion Podcast. And I do apologize, John, for all of that tongue twisting in there, but it's been an absolute, I have no words for it. To be able to connect with you and now present you to the audience.
This is an extraordinarily lovely welcome to your podcast, and I'm very, very grateful to be here, Lisa. Thank you so much. That's lovely.
You know, I just want to let the audience know, and you'll hear this maybe on every podcast that for season 5D, is that this season is beyond a podcast season. This has been a true unfolding manifestation of, incredible souls that have either been attracted to me on a vibrational level, or I cannot begin to tell you how they've come into my sphere of reality. And in this instance, just outside of me looking for guests for season 5D, what was very interesting, and John and I talked about this, his publicist actually came through me outside and at a different time when I was not looking for guests for season 5D yet. And yet she kept following up with me, and I told her, thank you so much for your patience, because now I am opening up the season. And once I got to know John, I was just like, wow, he has actually been there this whole time waiting to be, not waiting necessarily, but the timing was so divine.
Oh yeah, no, I've been waiting just for this.
So, I mean, John, I think that there are no, the intro doesn't give you any justice. I mean, would you like to first start with a little brief history of your life, or your first chapter and season of your life?
Lisa, I think that was a very, very generous introduction. And so I would be happy to leave it where it was. But I also would like to say that I have an astonishment with celebrity and wealth that I'm sure is common among us all. But one of the things I want to underscore for everybody is that as wealthy as I became, we are all the same. We're all kids who went to high school. You know, we got coffee and cigarettes. You know, we all hung out and broke rules under the bridge. You know, and my life was very normal. I was raised by a single mom. My dad died when we were 5, 3, and 1. I was the middle child. And my mom raised us on her own, and we were raised in the Catholic tradition. I've repented myself of being a Catholic mostly, but I honor very deeply some of the things that I was taught in that tradition, because we'll get into that a little bit later. But part of it was music. You know, I sang in the choir at church, and I was my mom helped introduce me to the finer things about music. That's been a treasure in my whole life. One of the things that, men in my vintage suffer from is this mentality that, men don't, do feelings. What we do is, we're supposed to be like, tough guys, and when we get together, as often as not, you talk about sports, cars, and women. Right. And if you've got anything else to say than that, well,
Yeah.
and so and where I'm going with this is back to the music, actually. It's a super wonderful thing that happens in our society with young men who become poets and then sing their poetry. They call it songs.
Mm-hmm.
And, where we denigrate men for being softies or, whatever it is when they start talking about feelings or compassion or those sorts of things. If they do it on a record, we put them on a pedestal. And I think it's a really important thing for us to help young, particularly men, but all people, to do music or one of the arts, one of those things that fulfills the need for self-expression, right? So that we can express ourselves honestly and completely without having to sort of shoehorn our story into other people's. So, anyways, I'm very, very grateful to my mom for leaving all of those things with me. I grew up,
And
I wound up, I was a hippie in 1968, 69. I wound up in prison for selling LSD to policemen who were dressed like hippies. I did about 8 months in 1969, released in 1970. I was 18 years old then. And I just, add that to say that, I've been on all sides of the tracks and, and somehow it's left me here, somehow it's left me here listening and, wondering more what we've got to say to each other.
right. I mean, audience, I have given you guys just a brief background about John's life. But what's even more beautiful, and I actually had just spoken to him before we had started recording, John is the author of All's Well. And I'm going to go ahead and share this on the podcast. What's really interesting is I had finished my first round of interviewing guests, and I was in between before I started this whole batch of recording everyone. And as you know, it's very energetically taxing. But as I have this huge vision for 8 billion to be of service to so many people, there was one night I felt really overwhelmed. And I was looking, I said, I started crying. I said, please, God, let me just know I'm going in the right direction. And as I started crying, and of course, as humans, we're doing other things while we're also talking to God. I happened to pick up a package that John had sent, not knowing, of course, I knew it was from John, but when I opened it, it was his book and said, All's Well. And the message in here says, Liza, surely one of those ones that dream dreams, then make them come real. So I immediately started crying, of course, because I was already crying. And it's so interesting how the universe kind of almost even answers it immediately. But this is where I didn't go as far. I started reading furthermore into the first pages, and it says, Teresa Louise Lefebvre, born not long after Earth began to go around the sun, and when she died, there were 500 billion galaxies and a multiverse, who taught the three most powerful things were faith, hope, and charity. But the greatest of these is love. And then that's when I lost it. It was so beautiful for me, John, because when I have such big vision, and I really want to be of service to this world, oftentimes some of the things that bombard you or overwhelm you is like, where am I going to make this money? Or how am I going to make the money to do this? And it was the precise message that I needed to hear from the universe was, it's love. It's love. All of that will all take care of itself. And that you're okay, Lisa, with the path that you're going on. And there's this huge thing about faith and just knowing that the how will get taken care of. It has already, I've come this far.
Yes, you've come this far, and things are very unlikely to change. We do worry a lot about how things will be, but they are always good. Sometimes I'm amused by the idea of how much of my life I spent worrying about getting bit by wasps.
Mm-hmm.
And then, maybe I've been bit, 2 or 3 times. And
right.
So
yeah, we spend more energy worrying about things.
Yeah. So spend more time loving, and you're probably going to, I tell people, if I lost everything now, I've spent enough of my money being generous to others that I'm pretty sure I could scrape up a peanut butter sandwich just about anywhere.
Right. Absolutely. Now, John, could you please let the audience know a little bit more about this book and the inspiration behind it? Because I'm telling you guys, haven't had the chance to read it in its entirety. Probably by the time that I release this podcast, I will. So I'll talk more about it. But I mean, I've read even just bits and pieces of it, and it's absolutely exquisite.
Well, those are wonderful words to hear. I'm a bit overwhelmed to hear them. But I spent my whole life thinking I'd probably write something before. People asked me when I was 20, what do you do? I'm a writer. What have you written? Well, nothing, but I'm getting ready. And this is where it wound up. I've written a bunch of songs and recorded them as well. But part of what inspired me was, this might be the last thing you write, John, so you might as well write about what's important to you. And I spent most of my life, Lisa, having, waking up in the morning with sort of a dull ache in my heart that was kind of imperceptible, and I wasn't exactly sure. Sometimes it was about, I don't like having, this job, or I don't like the relationship I'm in, or I wish I was in a relation, all those sorts of things. But there, even at the times when my life was the very, very most blessed, right? That ache didn't go away. So I wanted to see if I could put my finger on that. And that's sort of what this book was about. It turns out to be about us as a species. I speak about us generally, and who we are, what our place is in the universe, where we've come from, what we've been through, and what the future holds for us. And it's a bit gonzo. I think if there's a part at the beginning where we go way out to the outer reaches of the universe and look back in and see what what it all is and what our place in it is. And I think we might eventually come to the point where we look at the principles that we should adopt or could adopt if we want to advance as a civilization. What principles would we adopt? What do civilizations in the universe who have been around for 1 million years know that we don't know? One of the things I came up with while I was writing the book was this uniqueness meme, that we consider ourselves to be unique in the universe, and our best argument for our uniqueness is that we haven't heard from anybody else, as if anybody in the universe who had the capacity to speak to us would want to.
Right.
And then we look around and we go, well, why wouldn't they want to? Well, look at the way we treat ourselves. Why would they want us for friends? We utterly disregard, 3/4 of our brothers and sisters on the planet every day. We utterly disregard the plight. We know perfectly well the situation they're in, and we disregard it. So I wanted to look at that a little bit more closely and try to understand, firstly, what we've accomplished as a species, as a thoughtful species, I call us. And that might seem a little bit generous, but it's not. We are extremely thoughtful. And what we need to do about our society to get back on track towards perfecting ourselves, fulfilling the promise of human consciousness, fulfilling the promise of what it is we are in the universe. What it comes down to basically is, if there were no beings like us in the universe, and we know it because we're here. But if there were no beings like us in the universe would be this unspeakably immense, utterly astonishing, infinitely magnificent creation, or whatever it is, but astonishing for nobody. There would be nobody there. There'd be nobody to appreciate it. We are the universe's vessels of consciousness, and that makes us the universe's vessels of love, and of astonishment, and of appreciation. So we are what the universe has grown itself into, so that it may be astonished by itself. That's what we are.
And this, I know, audience, if you've hung on this far, this is a very deeply, this is probably going to be one of the deepest in thought, and of course, heart in podcasts of this season, because the depth of John's knowledge that he's found and the truth that he's found. This is really the basis of 8 billion, is that we are really all one. It's to promote unity consciousness and oneness consciousness. We are one. We are these expressions of creation, so to speak.
At the very least, Lisa, we are one community. And that if we only learned that lesson in our lifetime, that would be huge. We've spent our whole history thinking, well, there's this community there, and this community, there's Europe, there's Africa, there's right, and there was Romans, and then there was the Greeks. That doesn't matter. We can let them do what they want. We can't do that anymore. There are things happening to us in our world right now that we find so supremely upsetting, but I'm very grateful for them. I'm sincerely happy that we have the contagion of COVID, that we have climate change, and that we have this constitutional governmental authority problem that's pervasive all over the earth right now. That's human nature. That's what the other thing. But nature has brought these things forward to us to force us to understand that we are a single community. Yeah. You can't handle contagion and climate change by a bunch of widely dispersed free agents who have as if they have no responsibility to get along and do things together. So in our lifetime, maybe not in my lifetime, but certainly in yours and my granddaughter's lifetime, a whole thing that we've had in our minds as a human species forever is going to fall away. And that is this idea that there's no difference between us. Mm-hmm. None. There is no difference between us. One of the things I like to tell people is that, you and I, Lisa, and, that starving young woman in the deserts of Somalia whose dying baby whimpers at her breast that yields nothing but desert dust. All of us are exactly the same thing in this respect. We are vessels of human consciousness, and we all have the same capacity to dream, to hope, and we also have the same capacity for disappointment. Mm-hmm. And when we understand that, this world is going to change very, very quickly. We're going to realize that, I can't help it if I'm lucky. It's not a good enough excuse to keep all of this wealth and prosperity to ourselves. No. And we have a duty to share, and we need to share. Here's the beautiful part. We need to share so little to end all of that evil, to end all of that disregard, that ignorance. Ignorance, don't forget, ignorance contains as its base idea is ignore. Yeah. Right? To be ignorant means to have looked twice and turned away. You look, you saw, and you decided to ignore. We turned away. And that's what we've been doing. We've been ignoring the plight of all of the other people in the world who have the same capacity as us for disappointment, who we could be helping, but we do not. So I think in my granddaughter's lifetime, that's all going to change. And the human species is going to take a huge leap forward, And that is one away from selfishness and towards helpfulness.
I'm literally in tears. And it's okay, because I know this season is going to be all about that. And if you guys have tuned into many different seasons, you know that I cry. And the reason that I do is just because it's so beautiful and so profound. And that's my mission. You know what I mean? My mission, at least with 8 billion. But when I talk about it, this is what I told all the guests. I said, it's our mission. Our mission is no different. It might have different vehicles and look different ways. At the base of everything is love. It really is. And we are going to see, and that's why I was going to say, I really do. Like the vision of 8 billion is to really be a digital library of human consciousness. If I can achieve that with so many different people coming on here and all the right people coming into place, I have no doubt that it's going to happen. Just like John knows, like for his granddaughter, the world is going to be a different place. I know it too. And we are only scratching the surface of the shift that's happening. Because, you know, as we get deeper into this conversation, you know, we're going to talk about, you know, John was even saying this in a outside of this podcast, is what happens when you spark this beauty in a woman, like really touch the deepest parts of her soul. You really awaken something so big on this earth. And I feel like that's really what we're at the surface of right now, is all these women, this feminine energy awakening to its true essence of what was once before. It's nothing that we haven't, like, oh my gosh, this is not going to be something new we haven't seen. You were just even talking about that, John.
I just finished a book called The Immortality Key, which is a book about the history of mysticism in our species, way back to ancient Greece and beyond, 10,000 years before that. And there's a beautiful thing that the guy's an academic. He's a classicist, and he studies all the classic, the ancient Greek and other, classic and archaeological anthropological information that we have available to us. And his conclusion is that it's only been, since what we call the Christian era, that women have been disregarded so mightily. Before that, there's evidence that, women were in charge of pretty much everything that was important. Solving social problems, bringing along children, all of the things that have to do with what it really means to be a human being. This was all in the hands of women, and we only started to disregard that when, men took over Jesus, when men took over the church and called it the Catholic Church and made it only about men, and we got, disallowed. And that's only happened in the, it sounds like a long time, but it's only been 2,000 years that we've disregarded women so much. And a lot of cultures outside of that tradition continue to respect women the way women are, entitled to not at least equal respect as men, quite probably more. And the reason I say that is because, look what has happened to the world when we've left it in the charge of men. We're very aggressive and competitive and inquisitive and all of those things. And like I was saying before, we've been raised to disregard feelings, to not, men don't talk about their feelings. Men talk about, sports and cars and women.
Yeah.
Or, well, I know that's a generalization, or call it lovers.
Yeah.
Right. And that's sort of the ethos that I was raised in, and I think I recovered from it when I was about like 78. Mm-hmm. And right now I'm 70.
Another thing, audience, John is very funny.
This is a time, in my granddaughter Ida's lifetime, when women will resume their position in the highest regard in our culture, and it's what's going to save our culture. The Haida Nation, it's a First Nations nation on the northwest coast of British Columbia, where I live. The Haida Nation, when they have a big a meeting of in the community, mm-hmm. the hereditary chiefs, which are men, sit in a circle, and with them in the circle are the women women held in high esteem. And what is that? And that's the senior women in their culture. And so when we say, ladies and gentlemen, in the Haida Nation, they say, great chiefs of the Haida Nation, women held in high esteem, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
At every beginning of their meeting. That's the way we should be. Because, even these things are quite a bit of a generalization, Lisa, because, men are just as capable of compassion as women, but
Oh, they are.
we've trained to not be, and women are just as brutal as men.
Mm-hmm.
They've been trained to not be, right? So
Mm-hmm.
and we need to both embrace all of those things in each of us. Women need to be really, really tough. But that's almost like cultural misappropriation for me to say that. Like I should be telling women what they need to do. But those of us persons who have a male aspect in ascendancy
Mm-hmm.
need to stand back a little bit and learn from those of us who have a feminine aspect in ascendancy,
Mm-hmm.
because
Absolutely.
they are all within us all. So
No, and John, I absolutely agree. And in fact, right now in the spirituality world, in the new age, so to speak, if you circulate amongst that in social media, we've come across this time frame in the astrological calendar. It's almost like the birthing of a new era, which they call the age of Aquarius. And so we're only scratching the surface right now, where when we talk about it, it's moving to the feminine energies. But everyone, if you've come out this far, my podcast, I've talked about it almost on every podcast. It's the fusing of the feminine and male and masculine energies within oneself. It's finding the balance in that. But what you're going to notice is that shift towards love, compassion, kindness, to be more about how we operate in society, as opposed to hungry for money, power, greed. It's the turning of the tides. And it doesn't mean because you're a man that it's not going to work for you or you can't have a seat in power. It's you are going to be operating out at a different place inside yourself. And that's what I'm saying is it's such an honor to bring on John onto this podcast to speak in such depth, because I was just like, how do you know all this, John? But then again, I asked for all these people. It was my call out to the universe and I got it. And John is like the depth and profundity, if that's even a word. It's probably not. I can't even put into words the beauty of the male guests that I do have on this season. So
those of us who are, have the male aspect in ascendancy,
that's what he
right?
means. You've already read The Immortality Key, right? Have you ever heard, though, John, have you ever come across The Children of the Law of One by any chance?
No, not. I'll write it down. No.
No. So it was interesting that I came across this video, and Edgar Casey happens to be one of the greatest
Oh yes, I
intuitive
know.
prophet. Okay. So I came across this video because the gentleman who did the video talks about that Edgar Casey always references to the children of the Law of One. And so he did great. He went in depth in the research of it. And I came across a video. I'm going to probably share it with you on email, so then you could actually watch it on YouTube. But it was, I knew all of this, like the expansion of what I know that we are as human beings, and even beyond that, even beyond these physical vessels. And that's why John always talks about, like, we are no different. To me, it expands into the galaxies and multiverses and things and even unknown. It's so vast. I have no words for it. But apparently, the children of the Law of One, way back many years, maybe in the times of Atlantis, they were saying that, we had a society that existed where it was all based upon all of us living by the rule of love. And due to your brothers and sisters, what you would have done unto yourself. And so we lived off that society. But then, of course, there came that whole thing with greed. And so the people that are the children of the Law of One are those that live by unselfish love and unconditional love in any art form of their, in every art form and every profession, around the world. And so as time went by, when society changed, what ended up happening was greed and power became the motivation. And the children of the Law of One actually there was, it's not that they died out, it's just they became more quiet. And so what they do in essence is they still continue with their mission and their being, but they ultimately hold space for humanity. And they are just examples of that. They live by the law of humility, of unselfish and unconditional love. So it's beautiful. It's all of these things that are coming into my remembrance right now, and or into my reality of the
You had
depth
said
of what
before, right? You had mentioned before that that we all had transformed ourselves into a society where everybody was like after power and wealth and greed, and it is true. But it inspires me to respond in just this way. I think it's okay to be after power and to be after wealth. We just have to get rid of the greed. There's nothing wrong with power and wealth. We need power to make sure that the a-holes in the world are governed properly, right?
Absolutely.
We need wealth to develop the human resources of everybody in the world. So I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting wealth, and I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting power. It's what we do with it that really makes the difference. And that's when the importance of us, who've fallen into this sort of male thing, need the wisdom of women, of the feminine, to use their power and their wealth the wisest way.
Yes.
Right? These are the most important things that need to be brought to the table. They are the things that we lack the most in our society. If we're going to advance civilization, the thing that we have to do is, yes, get rich, and yes, use our power, but for sure, use it in the wisest possible way. And that is to develop all of us. The capitalists have this idea about how capitalism is all about the accumulation and elaboration of capital, but one of the fundamental ideas of it is capital for me, right?
Yes.
But for sure, the most important element of capital that we have is Earth. That is our greatest element of property in our store of capital. It's one of the greatest. The other thing that is maybe even greater, the only thing that's maybe even greater, is the human resources of all of us on the planet, right? And we, if we squander those, that is a much more terrible waste. Right now, about 20% or so of the people on Earth have their human resources properly developed, and the rest are scrambling just to make it through the week. And if we can, if we imagine what it would be like on this planet if that 80% of human beings were fully developed, they had all of their tools, they were properly prepared to pull on the oars. The productivity that would just explode. The productivity will explode when we develop the rest of the world. Developing the rest of the world isn't going to cost any money. It's going to make wealthy people much more wealthy.
Absolutely.
They just have. And this, I'm not going to be able to verify that in an hour, but I'll tell you this: I won't have to verify it to my granddaughter because she's going to see it before her eyes.
I know. I know even my son will, and that's what gives me. Yeah, that's what gives me this, this drive to actually accomplish this. Not only just for my son. Yeah.
One of the things that the capitalists always talk about is, we need growth. If we don't have growth, we're not going to, right? Well, what other kind of growth do we need than developing that 80% of the world?
Yeah. Because,
right now they can't afford shoes. And I'm not saying this is the highest thing in the world, but, when you develop people so that they can look after themselves, they're going to buy nice shoes.
Absolutely. Because most of humanity right now, though, John, they're so suppressed, and they can't even meet the basic human needs. How can they be of creation?
Yeah. How can they fulfill their promise?
How can they fulfill their promise? But we as a species are beautiful, beautiful reflections of miracles that can create and produce on such a high level. Like what you see right now is nothing in comparison. If we just spark that, spark that inner power within each of us. That is of course, my vision. And I know there's so many of us out there that have this vision where like what I said, like it's even you, John, with you writing books and being able to come on podcasts and talk about this stuff. We're educating people more and more to just maybe even think on just a little bit of a deeper level of what and who you really are. Because it's not about like, oh, me and all these people harvesting everything. If I could harvest wealth, I'd absolutely give it back. Because if we can just come from that place where we're all creators, which we all are, the world would be absolutely different place. And we are going to go there. That's the thing.
The First Nations people, like I was talking about, the Haida here and many of the other Aboriginal nations all had this tradition where the most powerful people they're men usually, but not always, but the women weren't that interested in accumulation, but the men and what they would do is have, here they call them a potlatch, and it's a festival that goes on for days. It's a feast of prosperity, and where the fellow or the person who throws the potlatch gives away everything he owns. Mm-hmm. He gives it all to the tribe, to the nation, to the people. They give away everything they own, and it was a matter of pride to them. And they give away everything they own to the community. The community has it, and then they build a great big totem, and that's how the totem reminds of everybody of that potlatch when such and such, and it turns into a contest of the guy who can give away the most to his, and what it shows, first of all, is responsibility to the community, but the other thing that it shows is a faith that if you look after your community will look after you. Mm-hmm. It cannot work any other way, and it's a magical thing that one of the sort of coarse ways of saying it is if we look after people in what we call quaintly the third world, if we look after them, we don't have to fear them. People that you help don't come and bust your balls. Yeah. People that you help love you back. They give you gratitude. The dividends of generosity are gratitude. All that money we spend every year on the military, we don't have to spend anymore, because we aren't going to be up against people who need what we have to save themselves, or need what they're going to be. They're going to be grateful for the help that we bring them, and we'll be rewarded with that by that gratitude, right? Absolutely. We still have to have police. We still have to have cops, because we have to look after the oppressed. We have to take care of oppressors in the world. And what I mean by take care of them is stop them. And, we have to, I like to think of it as, within our community, we call it policing. If a bunch of hoods like, the Ganjoweed or whatever they were called in Darfur that come and, if they, kidnapped 400 adolescent girls and took them like they did in Nigeria and started, raping them and passing them around as sex toys for the army of these rebels. If that happened in, Vancouver over here, we'd be expecting the police to stop that right now. But yeah. That when it happens in Nigeria, we somehow think, well, geez, that's on the other side of the border. That's not really our responsibility, is it? Well, I'm sorry, it is our responsibility. And there's some difficult problems to solve to how to fulfill that responsibility. Yeah. But, what I tell people in my book is that, once you know you have a responsibility, even though you don't know how you're going to fulfill it, you have a responsibility to find out how to fulfill it. When we have kids, parents very often don't understand exactly how they're going to fulfill the responsibility of raising their kids well, right?
Yes.
But they have the responsibility, and so they learn it. And that's what we have to do with the young ladies in Nigeria who were kidnapped by the rebels and abused by them. We have to figure out how to cross that border, and we're coming to ways of doing it. Of learning how to disregard certain things about sovereign borders, so that we can fulfill our responsibilities to the people who aren't only in our community but are in. We are in one community.
Yeah,
We don't get to say anymore, well, what happens to those young ladies in Nigeria is actually not our responsibility. Why? Because of sovereignty. No, sovereignty cannot be used as an excuse. We still have a responsibility, and we have to go there and help them somehow and figure out how to do it. So that's what we're going to do. It's going to be a challenge, but we can do it. But we have to, and once those young ladies know that where to turn for help, we have to stand up and help them.
absolutely.
We have to follow through with it. One of the examples I use for this idea I have of having to extend our responsibility across borders is, for instance, that tradition they have in certain societies where they perform what we quaintly call circumcisions on women. They excise their clitorises for some religious reason. I think we have a responsibility to go look after those women. And in our society now, what's going to happen is they're going to find out by internet and other means who in their community they need to turn to for help when they're confronted with those sorts of problems. And when they turn to us, we have to help them. We have to actually make sure that personal integrity that they have is not spoiled by some misbegotten idea of what we have to do to make our women clean. We have to. So we are one community. We have to find a way to cross the border to express our responsibilities everywhere, because our responsibilities the responsibilities that we do have go to everybody in the planet. We take these things for granted in our society. There's the security of the person, integrity, respect of the person, reasonable access to food, clothing, and shelter, reasonable access to the tools of self-improvement like education, reasonable access to medicine, to basic finance, to justice, reasonable access to a healthy environment. We take all those things for granted in our society, but they are really just the fruits of freedom. Really, those things that we take for granted in our society, they're super. We treat them as if they're privileges, and they are privileged. We're very privileged to have them, but they're more than privileges. We're entitled to them. But the thing is, when you try to look at why we're entitled to all those things that we call freedom, we're entitled to them. What distinguishes us from the lady in Somalia starving in the desert? If we're entitled to them, why is she not? Well, the answer is she is entitled to them. We're entitled to them, and we have a responsibility to her just as much as we have a responsibility to everybody else within our smaller community, our nations, to fulfill those things. I call them the universal rights. Rights. It's not a matter of equality, because you never even want to achieve equality in certain ways, right? But what you do want to have is an equality of the basics. Everybody has certain basics, and this is back to the point you were just talking about, and that is that people don't have enough resources to actually look out for themselves. Well, we have enough wealth in the world to make sure that everybody does have the resources to look after themselves.
More than enough, John.
Way more than enough.
More than enough. That's what I was going to say. And I think I had mentioned to John that I was going to do a documentary in the Philippines, and I had announced this already though, but where I'm going is, specifically where there's 2,000 children that are stateless. So it's border Philippines, Malaysia. And I probably will release this after because I don't want to actually say it. So by this time I will have recorded. However, both governments won't recognize them. But basic needs such as shelter and food are not being met. And yet it's, this is what's really interesting. Like when you go down to the southern part of the Philippines, it's beautiful blue water, and it's just the contrast of the people and the beauty of the land. And then also we're working with a nonprofit organization, and the unfortunate part too is just that they say that kids will buy, or these families will buy glue because the kids sniff it so they don't have hunger, so they won't, they suppress their hunger. And that, and I know that this is not just the Philippines, this is all around the world. This is exactly what you're talking about. But I think it's time to really change that. It's time for all of us to have the courage to take the stand and do something different in our lives. Mm-hmm. And it's, for me, I'd love the opportunity to continue to tell the stories, especially of those in the First Nation, and how they really operate from that standpoint of, it seems so out of the, it's not usually what you find, but yes, to give, who could give the most, because you'll realize that when you do give so much, you get it back tenfold. It's just the laws of the universe. If people could just understand that.
Yeah, it's magical, and it's real. And these people who think that hoarding is the way to wealth are they're missing the love part of it. For me, we haven't talked about this very much, but I got extremely fortunate on the internet. The .com situation. I don't know if your listeners probably may or may not be aware of that, but we started a business in 2000 that was money transfer for online gaming, and we went public on the London Stock Exchange, and we achieved a market cap of around $2 billion, and I owned like 27% of that. And then we were arrested by Uncle Sam. And then the year that I was arrested, we were halfway through the fiscal year of our business, and we were tracking to transfer $14 billion between American gamblers and offshore, internet gaming sites. At any rate, I stumbled onto this tremendous wealth, and I know a thing or two about wealth. I've learned, at one time my net worth was, I don't know, $400 million or something like that. And then the night that we were arrested by Uncle Sam, that went down pretty dramatically. But I'll tell you this, the kind of money it would cost to do these things that I'm talking about is, if those guys were like now Biden's talking about taxing people over $100 million, but on the income of that money. Elizabeth Warren was talking about taxing people who have over $50 million on the wealth itself. But if we did do that, about a 2% tax on that kind of wealth annually would provide everybody in America with child care, elder care, health care, education, basic finance, all of those things that I'm talking about. And those people who are that wealthy would actually never even notice. Spare me, 2 million, as soon as you start talking about 2%, then you say, oh yeah, that's a slippery slope. Then you can take 2%, then you're going to take all my money.
Yeah.
No, no, but we are going to take 2%. Why? Because it's our responsibility. And actually it's their responsibility to pay. And you know what? I think actually 80% of those will pay happily, because they understand it's that as long as we can prove to them that it's going where it belongs, and that is to provide these fundamental basics that we're all think we're entitled to, and yet we deprive so many people of them.
Yeah.
It would cost very, very little, and so there's vast wealth, and I've spoken with some money people about this idea, but people think that actually wealth is pretty much infinite. It's only dependent on the creativity of human beings to improve, to be productive, and so we can afford to do these things, and my granddaughter's generation are going to know that, yes. Because I'm gonna help them learn it.
You're gonna make sure they learn it.
And I think that in her lifetime, all of these things that I've just been speaking about, I think are going to become actualities.
It is.
if you think of all of the things we've learned in 100 years since my mom was born, when she was born, we hardly even knew what germs were.
Yeah.
We hardly even knew what germs were and what they did. And now look what we know. And that's in 100 years. And you know what, Lisa? We're learning now so much more quickly, so much more quality knowledge, understanding now than ever before. And it improves. The graph is just extremely steep of our learning. So imagine what we're going to learn in the next 100 years.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're going to learn is that looking after each and every one of ourselves is the road to Eden. It's the road to the fulfillment of our promise as the universe's vessels of consciousness. And, it's all we need to do is encourage people to think that way and behave that way ourselves. Children will learn what they see us do, not what we say to them. And so stop talking to them and just start being nice, being good. Be good to people in your community, and this is the way things will go. There's nothing wrong with being rich. There's only something. The only thing that's wrong is being rich but not giving up your proper share in fairness, right? There's nothing wrong with capitalism. The only thing that's wrong with capitalism is if it's not regulated. Mm-hmm. The only thing that's wrong with capitalism if it's not taxed, right? So I'm not here to say this is the end of I want capitalism to succeed because we need that wealth to look after everybody.
We absolutely do,
and we just need 2%. And once you take the 2%, then you're never going to stop. Yeah, no, we are going to stop. We'll stop at 2%.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an amazing place. That gives the audience something to truly think about, because I'm pretty sure John and I will have many, many conversations from here on out. And I'm pretty sure we could talk longer than an hour for sure. But it'll give you something to think about, audience. And I would love for you guys to grab his book, All's Well. And this is not by any means a podcast to promote his book. Like, I'm telling you, I read lots of books, and by far, I cannot wait to actually read it in its entirety. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have more conversations with you, John, and maybe even invite you back after I've read this, because the depth of your belief systems, which I know, like what you said with your granddaughter, are going to be, it's here. It's going to happen.
Well, I'm kind of an unusual creature in this time, in that
you are.
I'm very optimistic about our future as a species, and it's not a great leap. It's not difficult to understand why. We've been overwhelmed by selfishness and how ubiquitous it is around us, but we can overcome that. We've been given the tools. It's called consciousness.
It is consciousness. Now, John, if the audience would like to grab a copy of your book or learn more about your story, how could they get a hold of you or find you?
Well, johnlefebvre.com. If you spell that properly, then your readers can find that. But johnlefebvre.com is my website, and it has access to my writings and all of the music I've ever recorded. All my songs are the same. They're all the same. They're hymns to this very thing that I'm talking about all the time. But and also if anybody is on Facebook anymore, I know people are turning their back on it, and they probably should. But I run what they call a page on Facebook, and it's called Thoughtful Species, and it's about species. Yeah, and Thoughtful Species is a place where we kick around what's going on in the world today, and how it measures up to the principles that I speak about in here, that we've spoken about and that I write about in my book. So
I'm definitely joining that page, audience, and you should too, because I'm telling you, I could talk to John for a long time, because we've only scratched the surface of the whole theory of human consciousness. And it's here, generous. It's now. Mm-hmm. It's here now. John, thank you so much for being a part of the 8 Billion podcast. I tell
Very
this to
grateful.
I tell this to all my guests, but most especially you. You will always have a voice here on this platform. So thank you so much. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have you back, and we're going to talk in greater detail about your book and what's going on.
I'd be delighted, Lisa. It's very, very important to me, and it's a treasure for me to be on a show like yours. You know, as I said before, the most important thing we can pay to others is attention.
Yeah.
And I've just got a full serving.
Me too. So it's an equal exchange. But audience,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John, and to the audience for tuning in to this episode with John Lefebvre of the 8 Billion Podcast. We will catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the 8 Billion Podcast. If it's moved you in any way, please share your thoughts or give us a review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. To listen to more episodes, go to 8billionpodcast.com, or to learn more about our mission, go to 8billionproject.com.